Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world. Welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report, your one-stop source for all the latest news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program. Now, here's your host, Michael Butler.
Hello, and welcome to the Gone Fission Nuclear Report. Today is Monday, January 16th, 2023. We're covering all the news from the Department of Energy's Environmental Management Program across the country. We thank our friends at Fluor for being presenting sponsor for today's episode. We have a very special program for you today. We're going to be talking to Miss America 2023. Why, you asked, is a podcast that covers the Department of Energy Environmental Management Program feature Miss America on an episode? Well, it's a fair question, and I think we have a good answer. Miss America 2023 is Grace Stanke. Before becoming Miss America, Grace was Miss Wisconsin. The 20-year-old attends the University of Wisconsin at Madison, where she is majoring in nuclear engineering. After graduation, she plans to pursue a career in the nuclear industry. So we thought it would be interesting to see what's on this young lady's mind when it comes to nuclear energy, including the cleanup of former Manhattan Project and Cold War production facilities. Grace is a smart, articulate spokesperson for nuclear energy and will be a welcome addition when she is ready to join the industry team.
First of all, right now, 20% of our grid being powered by nuclear is a fantastic step in the right direction. I would love to see that number continue to grow. My personal ideal energy portfolio is majority powered by nuclear, so anywhere between 50 to 60% powered by nuclear energy. I say that because it's small land usage, it's effective, it's safe, it's reliable, which is the biggest thing as we continue to transition to zero carbon energy. You know, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm looking outside right now and it's snowing. So our roofs get covered up by snow. So solar panels on our roofs just won't necessarily cut it throughout the winter. And you know what? In states like Alaska, they don't see the sun for months at times. But I do believe that important other zero carbon energy sources are essential as we continue to move forward. So I see those making up about another 30%, a combination of wind, solar, biomass, geothermal. And then the remaining amount of power would come from hydroelectric and still some fossil fuels. As much as I would like to see fossil fuels, completely go away, I still think in some scenarios it will make sense for fossil fuels to be there.
We'll hear more from Miss America later in the podcast. We'll be back with today's headlines right after this from Fluor. Environmental Management has released its 2022 report card on fees paid to cleanup contractors across the complex. Here's a look at the top 10 fee earners for the past year.
Washington River Protection Solutions at Hanford led Department of Energy EM contractors in fee earnings in 2022 with $45.7 million, which represents 87% of their available fee. Second was Savannah River Nuclear Solutions with $37 million in fee, 95% of their available total. Rounding out the top 5 were UCOR with $27.5 million, Savannah River Mission Completion with $26.9 million, and Hanford Mission Integration Solutions with $20 million. In sixth place was Four Rivers Nuclear Partnership in Paducah, Kentucky, at $16.8 million, followed by Fluor BWXT Portsmouth with $14 million. Mid-America Conversion Services, the uranium conversion contractor at Paducah, earned $7.8 million. Savannah River National Laboratory was awarded $6.2 million, and SRS security contractor, Centera, earned $6.2 million.
4 communities near DOE sites are among 18 across the U.S. that have been designated as World War II heritage cities. The communities were chosen by the Department of the Interior to recognize contributions by counties, towns, and cities in support of America's World War II effort. DOE-related communities selected include Los Alamos County in New Mexico, home of Los Alamos National Laboratory; Oak Ridge, Tennessee, home of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory and the Y-12 National Nuclear Complex; the Tri-Cities in Washington State, home of the Hanford site; and Savannah and Chatham counties in Georgia, near the Department of Energy's Savannah River site. The Heritage Cities program is run by the National Park Service, which also manages the Manhattan Project National Park. Crews with EM contractor Central Plateau Cleanup Company are performing risk reduction activities to prepare a former plutonium processing facility on the Hanford site for eventual disposition. The plutonium uranium extraction plant, or PUREX, was the final and most advanced chemical separations plant on the site. Its job was to reprocess fuel rods irradiated in Hanford's reactors. And finally, EM received a fiscal year 2023 budget of $8.3 billion, a 5% increase over the amount the cleanup program received for FY 2022. President Biden signed the fiscal year 2023 Consolidated Appropriations Act late last month. It contains 6% more funding for EM than the amount proposed for the program in the FY 23 President's budget request.
Let's crown a new Miss America. Your Miss America 2023 is Miss Wisconsin, Grace Stanke.
Well, the job of podcast host does have a few perks. This week's episode is a great example. For what may be the first time ever, nuclear energy has crossed paths with Miss America. Grace Stanke, who won the title in December, is a nuclear engineering major at the University of Wisconsin. As I mentioned in our opening, she is a smart, articulate young lady who is looking forward to joining the nuclear industry upon graduation. Here's our interview with Grace Stanke, Miss America 2023. We're talking with Grace Stanke today. Grace is the reigning Miss America for 2023, and we're so happy to have you, Grace, on the podcast. Hello.
Hi there. I'm super excited to be speaking on this podcast today. It's always fun connecting with other nuclear individuals and connecting with people all across the country.
Well, thank you. You're going to mean a lot to the nuclear industry because of your background and what you're doing. You're majoring in nuclear engineering at the University of Wisconsin. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the convergence of the nuclear engineering curriculum and the training that you're going through and the Miss America role that you have now. Those would seem to most people to be two very different worlds. And in one engineering side, you're in a very disciplined and meticulous environment, as engineers are. And on the other side of the coin is Miss America. You're much more creative and freewheeling. So I'm wondering how you are able to combine those two worlds together, and how does one complement the other?
I fully agree with your statements about these being two very separate worlds, but there has been a lot of really incredible overlaps that have really shown themselves over the past 3 weeks here since being crowned Miss America. As a nuclear engineer, I frequently wanted to improve my communication skills a little bit more, and I wasn't always a nuclear engineer. You know, when I started out in the Miss America organization, I wanted to improve my violin skills, and that's really where it all started for me. Then I learned about the scholarships, the interview skills, and the incredible women I would meet as well. But it started to go hand in hand with my degree, where I started recognizing the nuclear industry has so many brilliant people behind the scenes working on technology, working on the science, but we don't have enough people communicating between the engineers and the scientists and the physicists and to the general public. And I've really enjoyed communicating. I love people. I love hearing stories. And that's where being Miss America really comes in, is having this ability to connect with individuals all across the country about nuclear energy and about whatever is going on in their lives, because it's about filling this gap between the nuclear industry and the general public, but also serving the country as Miss America.
Well, there's been kind of a stereotype of pageants that a lot of people have, but it seems to be transforming now to where there's a lot more emphasis on brains as much as beauty. And I'm just wondering how you got started in pageants and what you think about the changes that have occurred in the pageant world.
So I started when I was 13 years old, actually, in the Miss America organization. I have been playing violin since I was 8. And around the time I turned 13, I started competing in local violin competitions in my hometown to just earn some scholarship dollars to go towards violin lessons. And the first competition I went in, I forgot my music. I shook. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. And for whatever reason, my 13-year-old mind was like, how do I solve this? Exposure therapy, let me do it more. And I ended up coming across the Miss America's Outstanding Teen organization, which is for women ages 13 to 18. And I got involved that year. And it just kind of happened. Since then, I fell in love with the organization and everything Miss America stands for, ranging from good interview skills and learning how to handle questions of all different types, all different kinds. I seriously stand by the statement that Miss America interviews are substantially harder than any sort of engineering job interview I've gone through, which is quite funny, actually, to me in my mind. But it's something that has become so valuable to me, both in the scholarship dollars I've earned and the friends I've made. Right now, I've earned almost $70,000 in scholarships from my time in the Miss America organization. And that's going towards my degree in nuclear engineering. And now it's opened up the door for me to go and get a master's degree that I wasn't even considering prior to 3 weeks ago, which is really life-changing in so many ways. And I'm learning more and more about, you don't have to be Miss America to earn that amount of scholarship dollars either. States and local competitions all across the country are awarding anywhere from $100 to $10,000 to $80,000 just at those levels, which is just changing so many women's lives all across the country.
Well, on the nuclear side, how did you become interested in nuclear engineering? I read something about you might have wanted to prove a point to your father. Is that right?
Yeah. So when I was 16 years old, I knew I wanted to be in engineering. I was very blessed in that sense. I grew up with my dad being a civil engineer. So I got to see construction sites, watch bridges get taken down overnight, and all sorts of really neat things like that. So I always knew engineering was for me, but I didn't know what kind. And I had narrowed it down to aerospace and nuclear. And I'll be completely honest, the only reason nuclear engineering was on the list is because it sounded really cool. But when I started talking to my dad and my family about what I should really do, my dad went, no, don't go into nuclear. There's no future career there. So 16-year-old me, flipped my hair over my shoulder and said, watch me. And I went into it as a freshman at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I had really no background in the industry or in the field overall. But as I continued to learn more and get into the industry more, I learned that my dad's alive today because of nuclear medicine. He went through cancer twice and he wouldn't be here today. And he actually just had his CAT scan, his yearly checkup yesterday, and it's all good. So we love it. It's working. The medicine is doing its job. And that's something that's really life-changing in terms of perspective on what the nuclear industry was to me when I was 13, 14, 15 years old versus now, where I'm seeing it now that it powers 20% of the country. I want to see that number continue to grow. I want to see the medicinal applications continue to grow. And I want to see nuclear science welcomed and embraced with more positive outlooks, because it has the power to change lives in ways that we don't even know. And that's nuclear science that I've fallen in love with.
Well, that's a great testimonial. I know the nuclear industry will welcome you with open arms because of all of the talents and capabilities that you bring. I know you're a member of Women in Nuclear. I just wonder what that organization has meant to you and your involvement in it.
Yeah, I have only attended one national conference, actually. It's difficult to be involved in Women in Nuclear in Wisconsin just because we don't have a local chapter. I'm largely involved in a lot of different NGOs and nonprofit organizations in the nuclear industry, though. I was president of the American Nuclear Society chapter at UW-Madison. And it's really important to recognize how all of these different organizations are promoting different people going into this field, reaching out to people. You know, there's more than just engineers that go into this field. We need communicators, we need journalists, we need politicians, we need everybody in this field and all hands on deck with it. And all of these industries, all of these NGOs are really contributing to the industry in that way. Non-governmental organizations. I should specify what NGO is. My apologies.
A lot of our audience is pretty immersed in acronyms. They know.
Yeah, it's so funny. So I've got to add on to that just a little side story about acronyms and everything. So I co-opt with Constellation, a company in America that runs about 12 different nuclear power plants. And it's so funny because the group I worked with, they loved Star Wars and they loved acronyms, right? So I'm not a Star Wars person at all, right? I've never seen all of the movies. I've seen them at some point in my life, but I've never watched them. I could not tell you a single thing. All I know is there's Darth Vader and Han Solo and lightsabers, right? So it was really funny because going into this team, I was like, oh yeah, we've got this one project called Lightsaber, and it's this full acronym for LITSABR and full acronyms made specifically around Star Wars. And I chuckled at that. It was really great. And that wasn't the only one. There was Darksaber, there was Holocron, there was a ton of them, which it just made me laugh. And it speaks to the culture that there is in the nuclear industry. And, you know, we're well versed in pop culture and media.
You've probably noticed that a lot of nuclear reports, the first 3 pages are a list of acronyms and what.
Yeah.
I've heard people make entire sentences and use nothing but acronyms, and you really have to parse the jargon to know what folks are talking about sometimes. How many women are in your nuclear engineering program at the University of Wisconsin?
As of right now, my graduating class will have 3, including myself, in the undergrad program. Overall, I don't know the total number. I know of 3 or 4 other women that are in the classes below mine, but we're slowly making change. You know, change for an increase in diversity doesn't happen overnight. And it's having more women in role model positions that will lead to that change. And I think that's one thing that the Miss America organization is doing to promote diversity and promote change in society as a whole. You know, I'm very lucky to be a nuclear engineer and have that option for future women in nuclear, because that's something that I never saw throughout my college career and throughout my time in the nuclear industry. Frequently, I was the only woman in my workplace or the only woman on my team. And that's something that I'm a very confident individual. I don't know if you picked up on that, you know, but it's something that it didn't impact me a lot until after a while, it really kind of started to impact me. And, it's about building that community and building people around you that support you in everything you do. And right now, UW-Madison is actively going through and pushing for an increase in diversity in the nuclear field. And we're starting to see that happen. Like I said, that change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, but I firmly believe that the actions of the nuclear industry right now are going to lead to that change. And if we continue spotlighting those individuals, continue having good role models for people to look up to, that's a powerful thing. And it doesn't, I'm not saying they have to be C-suite individuals, just engineers that aren't afraid to talk and tell what their story is.
What about the women today who are freshmen or about to enter college, who are in the same situation you were? They think they want to be engineers, but they're not sure what kind. What would you advise them in terms of thinking about nuclear engineering as a career?
I would almost say, for me personally, this was one of the biggest convincing factors to go into nuclear that I didn't know until I got into nuclear. Nuclear engineering is a melting pot of all different types of engineering. We need to know a little bit of mechanical. We need to know a little bit of electrical. We need to know a little bit of chemical. And we need all of those different parts to make things like a power plant run. And that's one thing that's really fun for me to be a part of, because I love to wake up and do something different every day at work. I don't like to get stuck in that rut of wash, rinse, repeat, and so on and so forth. But when going into an engineering field, it's going to be a good and positive job, but I wish it was easy culturally. You ask about how many graduating women are in my class, and only 3 of probably the about 35 people are women that are going to be graduating this spring. And that's something that is going to take time to change, but continuing to be strong, continuing to rely on strong, confident people around you to support you through that process is the important part. Engineering is so worth it. You have the ability to change lives in ways that you wouldn't really know. It's not a direct change, but being able to create things and solve problems and execute those designs is life-changing.
Is there anything that has surprised you in your nuclear engineering studies? Or something that you've run across that you maybe didn't know, that you said, man, that's really amazing?
Yeah, bananas are radioactive. That's crazy to me. And it's also one of my fun things to talk about as Miss America too. Kindergartners and first graders, that nothing makes them go more crazy than talking about how bananas are radioactive, because those are a very normal daily part of our lives. And it shocks me how hush-hush the whole nuclear industry is about really showing how they're involved in all of society. I look at MRI machines, right? Magnetic resonance imaging machines. When they were first released to the world, they were actually NMRI machines. They were nuclear magnetic resonance imaging machines. But so many patients were afraid of the word nuclear and they wouldn't use the machine. So they just got rid of it. And now it's a very commonly widespread and very commonly used machine, which just speaks to how I was shocked, because, like I said, you have so many positive things and so many ways that nuclear science is already in society, yet we're not acknowledging it. And if we acknowledge it, we're going to change that public perception surrounding nuclear. People are going to realize how it's positively impacting their lives and how it can continue to change lives if we actually embrace it and utilize this technology for good, knowingly.
You've indicated that you want to be an influence in addressing some of the misconceptions about nuclear energy, and you sort of opened the door and then your last comments about that. What do you think some of the major misconceptions are about nuclear energy?
One thing that continues to crack me up is that how the media portrays nuclear waste, right? First of all, I don't frequently refer to it as nuclear waste. It's more of a byproduct of a reaction. But talking about that waste and how dangerous it is, there's never been any leakages of any sort of nuclear byproducts in the past 50 years from nuclear power plants. And that's from our culture of safety that we continue to uphold. And talking about the byproducts and what nuclear power plants actually produce for one human being throughout their entire lifetime, the power that they would use throughout their whole life would only create 1 soda can's worth of nuclear waste, which just speaks to the power density of uranium and the power density that nuclear power plants present, on top of also the perks of small land usage. You know, right now we're at this point in time where we need to start converting to zero carbon energy, not only just because of climate change, but because fossil fuels are continuously a changing economic thing, and who knows when we're going to run out of them, right? So switching over to that zero carbon energy is a good idea for many, many reasons. And if we continue supporting nuclear power, we're going to have the ability to bring down costs and continue using that small land.
Well, this podcast is devoted primarily to the cleanup of old nuclear facilities that were involved in nuclear weapons production and the Manhattan Project and later during the Cold War. Have you had a chance in your study so far to look at the decommissioning of nuclear facilities and the importance of cleaning up these older, aging, contaminated facilities? And is anything in your studies that given you any information on that yet?
So shockingly, actually not a huge focus. Like, it's been mentioned and brought up. I will say I have one semester, I have 17 credits left in my degree right now. And I believe one of the classes I'm enrolled in for this spring does cover this a lot. So I don't want you getting the impression that it's not covered, because I'm certain it is. I just haven't gotten there yet. But it's so important to continue the maintenance of those areas, largely because as sad as it is to say, when we first started experimenting and learning about nuclear technology, we didn't know about how to manage it. We didn't know about how it would actually result in, and that's what we're feeling the effects of today, and what you guys do is all about. And that's something that's so important to do and continue to maintain, because it's all about safety, all about learning. That's why when I talk about Chernobyl and Fukushima, when it comes to the power industry and those disasters, they changed the nuclear industry for the better. We learned something from it. No industry is perfect. As much as I'd like to say, nuclear is one of the safest, is either number 1 or number 2 in safety. The only thing that it's tied with pretty much is hydroelectric. I believe it's 0.1% that separates them for safety. The only reason why I would never say it's 100% is because nothing is 100%. And that's just a reality we live in. But we've learned how to maintain things. We've learned how to handle and clean up the waste and clean up the harmed areas. And that's something that's powerful.
Well, I'm going to tell you something you may be able to incorporate in your
I'd love that.
Presentations as you talk around the country. Environmental cleanup and decommissioning is now a relatively new field in the nuclear industry, but it's a growing one. And there are decades of work ahead for people who are involved in that. So it's going to create jobs for a long time. And the University of Tennessee has created what I think is the nation's first decommissioning minor in their nuclear engineering department. So they have people now who are studying decommissioning of nuclear plants and cleanup of the older DOE facilities and getting a good part of their degree in that area. So it is growing. And you might, I know you go to Wisconsin, but you might give the University of Tennessee some credit when you talk around the country about their decommissioning minor program, because it's been in place for a few years now and it's growing, and there's a lot of student interest in that.
It's exciting to hear about that too, because, it comes back to the idea that we just need more people in nuclear, and people in all sorts of different backgrounds. It's not just engineers, not just physicists, but being able to specialize in things like that is so, so important. So I'm glad to hear that and excited to hear that. I actually think I'm headed to University of Tennessee. I'm guessing you're talking about Knoxville, right?
I'm talking about Knoxville.
Yeah, I was going to say I'll be down there for the student conference, and I'll have to swing by the department and say hi to everyone who's involved in that. And I'll tell them you say hi, I hope.
You'll see Dr. Wes Hines. Dr. Hines is the head of the nuclear engineering program and has done a lot to help promote interest in the decommissioning program. Let me just ask you about your view of nuclear energy and our overall energy mix. Nuclear produces about 20% of our total electricity these days. How do you see nuclear fitting into our energy future?
First of all, right now, 20% of our grid being powered by nuclear is a fantastic step in the right direction. I would love to see that number continue to grow. My personal ideal energy portfolio is majority powered by nuclear, so anywhere between 50 to 60% powered by nuclear energy. I say that because it's small land usage, it's effective, it's safe, it's reliable, which is the biggest thing as we continue to transition to zero carbon energy. You know, I'm from Wisconsin. I'm looking outside right now and it's snowing. So our roofs get covered up by snow. So solar panels on our roofs just won't necessarily cut it throughout the winter. And you know what? In states like Alaska, they don't see the sun for months at times. But I do believe that important other zero carbon energy sources are essential as we continue to move forward. So I see those making up about another 30%, a combination of wind, solar, biomass, geothermal. And then the remaining amount of power would come from hydroelectric and still some fossil fuels. As much as I would like to see fossil fuels, you know, completely go away, I still think in some scenarios it will make sense for fossil fuels to be there.
Well, the Department of Energy has focused a great deal on preparing the workforce of the future. Knowing that we're going to need a lot of workers in the nuclear industry in the years ahead. What are your own career goals in the nuclear field, and how do you think you can help use your platform to both maybe advance your own nuclear career, but also to help others consider nuclear as a career?
For me personally, my career plans long term is to actually end in a similar role to what I am in right now. I love advocacy. Like I said, I love talking to people, hearing stories. I love talking about nuclear too. But going through and looking at how that would look if I went into it right away, that's a touchy subject, because for me, one of my biggest pet peeves is when politicians and other advocates have little to no experience in what they're talking about. So for me personally, I plan on in my early career doing the engineering, going through and working at a power plant, getting familiar with that technology, pressing the buttons, turning the valves, and everything along those lines, and then moving into some role of front-end advocacy. And I think it's so important that we continue to promote, you know, not only people gaining management skills as they continue from their early career to their later career, but then also continuing to increase the amount of people that are technically specified. You know, for some people, talking is not their thing, and I completely respect that. So not a huge deal. But great, then that's an opportunity for you to become a specialized consultant in a specific topic. And that's something that is incredibly valuable to people all across the world when it comes to the nuclear industry. I think that covers the second part of that question.
Yes, indeed. And I think you've got a lot of communications directors out there in the industry kind of shaking in their boots right now based on the way you're responding to these questions.
Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. For now, like I said, I want to be engineering to start off with. And, you know, I am open to some sort of blend. I'm open to opportunities right now as Miss America. That's always something, you know, I'll always listen. But it's interesting because I want to make sure I don't lose touch from the technical world and don't lose touch from what is actually going on in the industry, especially once I move into the advocacy role, because it's just something that is so important to me to stay knowledgeable on that front.
Well, finally, let me ask you kind of a personal question. We all watch the Miss America pageant, and there's that traumatic, I guess, moment at the end where we're going to see who's the winner and who's the runner-up, and then they make the announcement. How does it feel when they call your name and say that Miss Wisconsin, Grace Stanke, is Miss America 2023?
I think it's a life-changing moment. First of all, the ground kind of melts away from around you. But for me, honestly, it's just like chaos, just screaming noises in my head, that it's just no coherent, actual legible thoughts. Because similar to the way an athlete pictures winning the gold medal, that's kind of what I treated the job of Miss America. And that's one thing that I'm incredibly thankful for. You know, becoming Miss America is a full-time salary job. And on top of that, I've also earned $68,900 in scholarships. And that's opened up opportunities for me to go to grad school and pursue career options that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do before. But beyond that, it's truly remarkable to represent this class of women. You know, one of the things that I always talked about throughout my week at Miss America was we are the women who can. And just that's it, period. Because up on that stage, the 50 other women up there were trauma surgeons, doctors, lawyers, teachers, and so many incredible women that are going to go on and do incredible things as they move into the world. Becoming Miss America is a huge accomplishment, but it's a stepping stone to go on and do greater things. And these women are just skipping the stone and going straight to it. And that's something that just speaks to the character of the organization. It continues to award $5 million a year in scholarships, and I am so lucky to be one of those women.
Well, you're a wonderful representative of our country and of women in general, and certainly of the nuclear industry. And we're just so pleased to have you as a guest on the podcast today. I'm wondering, is there anything else we haven't covered or talked about that you'd like to say to our audience before we go?
Ooh, well, our audience is largely nuclear people, which is exciting because there's not many nuclear specific audiences that I have. But the biggest thing is take time to listen to the youth and to promote what the youth are doing in terms of getting into the nuclear industry. I often feel like nuclear is something that you have to work into, and you know, even once I get my degree, I'm still going to need to spend probably 1 to 2 years training, getting extra certificates and getting, you know, certified nuclear reactor engineer, whatever it may be. But take the time to be patient, listen to the questions. We are all so excited to learn, so excited to be part of this field and watch it continue to grow. And we want to be part of that growth. So I ask that everyone that's listening continue to promote that growth, not only in youth, but in people all around you, as well as your family members. You know, Thanksgiving dinners, I get it. They'll always ask, nuclear engineering, so you're gonna build bombs. And I'm like, okay, that's not it. That's not it. Let's take a step back, but be patient and answer those questions, because that's what's gonna lead to substantial change in our society. And we need that change in order to continue growing our industry and changing society for the better.
Well, Grace, congratulations on being Miss America. And thank you so much for being with us on the podcast today.
Well, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Today's episode of the Gone Fission Nuclear Report is brought to you by Fluor. We're building a better world.